Speech Pitch by Iska Sak.
Hello, George. Hello, Tom, and hello, Mary. And welcome to my little podcast interview. Thank you for sparing your time with me. So before we dive into questions, would you like to introduce yourself in a couple of words?
Okay. My name is George Bose. I'm a third-year PhD student at the Sheffield CDT, and my topic is generally speech enhancement for human perception.
Cool. Thank you, George.
My name's Tom Pickard. I'm a second-year PhD student at the CDT. I'm working on idioms, idiomatic language, and non-literal language in general.
Nice.
My name's Mary. I'm a second-year PhD student in the CDT, and my research looks at privacy-preserving voice control for smart homes.
Nice. So how do you enjoy your today's conference so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's cool that it's so broad topics. It seems that the Edinburgh people do a lot less specific stuff, or very hyper-specific stuff in very niche topics, whereas we tend to do things that are a bit more broad, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see presentation.
Yeah. Do you enjoy it, Tom? I see you running up and down holding the mic.
Yes. So it's quite a full schedule today because the whole conference is packed into a day and a half. And then I also volunteered to do a whole bunch of other things like running around with microphones and sitting here talking to you, Guan Yu. So I've crammed my day full of activity today. But I'm enjoying it, so that's good.
Yeah, cool. And Mary, did you enjoy yours so far?
Yeah, no, it's been really good. There's been many interesting talks, a lot to take in, and a lot which I don't know about. But yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a part of the conference. There are so many things that you've never heard about before, or there are some new ideas coming to your vision.
I was just going to say, I'm appreciating the fact that it's a conference for the PhD students as well as it's not as much of an academic conference or a nice mixture of both, and that we've got people visiting from industrial sponsors, and it's a slightly different kind of vibe to what I would expect from a pure academic conference, I suppose, and it's in a good way.
Yeah, would you say that's a little bit more informal or?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It certainly feels more relaxed. I mean, maybe that's because I know lots of people, whereas I have done so much at other venues in the past, but yeah.
Cool. Nice to know about that. So we all know that conferences and workshops are part of PhD students' life. And can I ask, what is your conference experience like in general? Do you have any daunting or surprising moments?
Well, the first one I attended was virtual interspeech in 2020. And that was quite sort of awkward, I would suppose, because it was all online. So that was quite difficult. You had problems with the chat rooms and the voice stuff where, you couldn't necessarily hear, if you were at a virtual poster session, you wouldn't be able to hear the answer to your question the way they wouldn't be able to hear you. But I think a lot of that is mitigated by stuff just being in person. Being able to physically look at someone and talk to them is much easier, I think. And that's kind of, that's the real strength of these.
Yeah, I think that's our first year of our PhD life, right? Or everything was online. So, but I guess you may have very different first year.
I did something similar during my master's. I got a paper out of my sort of master's project that was presented at a workshop, which is collocated with one of the conferences, and that was purely online because it was during COVID. And I had a similar thing. So I was presenting and I sort of gave the presentation, went offline and was sort of sitting around. It was a slightly odd experience, but I can't work out how much of that is just because everything was weird at that point in time anyway, right? And they had poster sessions where they were trying to use Gather Town to have these little avatars walking around as if you were in... And it was sort of novel rather than good, I think. But yeah... but that didn't work. But then, so I have been to obviously the CDT conference a couple of times now in person, and I went to LREC last year, which was in Marseille, which was in person with some hybrid elements. So some presenters were remoting in, and it seemed to work on the whole. But they had whole team of volunteers who were like looking after the tech and running around with like something. So every room that you went into had somebody who was very on it. And I think everyone's just gotten more used to that kind of hybrid format, and the tech's gotten a bit better, which definitely helped.
Yeah, I see. But apart from like changing from the online conferences to hybrid styles and then in-person styles, is there any other parts of your experience changed along your progress of your PhD project?
So I guess like the CDT conference last year was the first conference I'd been to. And then it was like the first time I was doing a poster presentation, and I think I just didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't know like how much people would really like chat to you and things like that. But it was quite good because, like Tom said, it was quite an informal one anyway. And then I've been to like two conferences since. I went to an Internet of Things one where I like wasn't presenting, which was in Holland, to get like just an idea of what conferences are like. And then I think, they can all quite different, because then the one I went to, that was like a small one and it was really quite nice. And then the next one I went to where I was presenting some work, that was a really massive conference and really not really anything like the conferences I've been to before. So it was almost like a new experience again, like just being in a room packed full of like what felt like thousands of people. And it was a lot more challenging to like talk to people and things like that. It just felt very chaotic. So I think they're different. The experience is good, but they vary.
Yes, I think what you mentioned is the role of yourself is different in conference. Sometimes you are mainly the visitors, and sometimes you are presenters, or even giving presentation in front of the whole room.
Yeah, I think in terms of you mentioned difference in size of conferences, I think there's kind of like an inverse relationship between the size of the conference and the sort of quality of your audience when you present, because I've done a couple of quite small conventions, and a lot of time you get a big crowd in these small conventions because there's not much else to do necessarily. Yeah. But that means, you get more eyes on your work and maybe some more questions and more people sort of learning about what you're doing. Whereas if you go to these big conferences which last week I was in Greece for ICASP, and that had, within my topic, that had 8 sessions that were all in my topic that all happened at the same time. So that audience is quite spread out. So I didn't necessarily get to see the sort of presentations that were in my topic because I was presenting at the same time. And that's a conference organization thing, but it's also the size that's affecting that. So
yeah, I see. So here we have a couple of questions regarding attending conferences from Year 1 PhD students. Would you be able to shed some light on these questions? So the first question is, what is the best way to get the most out of a conference without exhausting yourself?
I start with that one?
Yes.
So I've written some things down for this. So firstly, I've said you should try to arrive at your destination maybe a couple of days before the conference actually starts. That gives you time to sort of like, if it's in a foreign country, to sort of, do some sightseeing and just kind of adjust yourself. Like avoid arriving exactly on the morning that it starts, because you're traveling.
Especially if you've got a big difference in time zones and something like that to adjust to, right? Yeah.
That's true.
Weather.
Yeah,
I went to the south of France last year, and I'd never been to the south of France before, or not for decades. And I hadn't packed the right clothes and had to go and do some clothes shopping because I had things that were too hot for Marseille in July.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is consider the weather where you're going. And I guess I've also said to plan out which sessions you want to go to sort of beforehand. So, you have like an itinerary of your own. Like a lot of conferences have online platforms that help you with that these days, which is useful. And also I think if you're new to conferences, you might think that you are kind of required to stay in a session for it as long as it runs. But I think it's fine to drop in and out of sessions to exactly the presentations that you want to attend. And I've also got the last thing, don't forget to eat. Stay hydrated and drink a lot of coffee, which just tends to be what I do. Or sort of stay energized. So
yeah, that's a very practical, I would say. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I do think it's good to like decide what you're interested in more so before you go, because I feel like everything seems really interesting, and then if you try and listen to every talk, then you just get really fatigued with it. So it's sort of good to save your energy for some of the talks that you're like actually really interested in.
Yeah, sort of keep your powder dry for the main things. And I think it is okay to skip a session and take a break and go and sit outside and get some air and food and water and things. It's also easier to do that if you do it at those sorts of times rather than when everyone's trying to eat during a lunch break or that kind of thing. Slightly harder to network with it, but yeah.
Yeah, nice. Can I summarize it like get prepared and take care of yourself?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way of summarizing that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, what is the best way to network?
I think posters is the best way. Poster sessions generally. I think that's the advantage. I think that there's a bit more maybe prestige with when you're doing a presentation over a poster, but I think generally posters are much better for actually talking to people for extended periods. Sometimes if there's multiple people who are both sort of looking at this poster, you can get some discussion going and get talking that way. Also, I think if you do go to oral presentations, ask questions. Yeah, you guys know that I always ask questions. Like it's
do.
But I think the reason I do that is because it's sort of if you ask questions, you can sort of without being too cynical, you can kind of advertise yourself there that you're someone who's engaged and sort of is interested in topics, and then you can talk to the presenters afterwards perhaps and sort of follow and continue the discussion.
I have had at least one conversation with somebody who wasn't the presenter, but somebody else came up and talked to me, which was prompted by a question that I'd asked.
Exactly.
So they sort of clocked you and then might come and talk to you if they thought what you asked was interesting. Or
the thing with these big events especially is that because their schedules are so packed, there's often not a huge amount of time for discussions or questions afterwards, which I think there probably should be. Often there's time for one question. So I think that's the way to utilize that.
I totally agree with your point about posters. That's really what they're for, is to stand by your work and have a conversation about it with people. Whereas the question at the end of a lecture, half the time it'll be some white middle-aged man who asks a question of, have you thought about doing X? And then it will get translated to something that the person could understand because they're both doing it in a second language or whatever, and then they'll go, oh no, we haven't thought about that, that's a good idea, we'll think about it. And nobody's really gained anything out of that session other than that guy got to show off that he thought of something. Whereas at a poster session you can actually have a conversation about.
Have you ever written an email after speaker sessions?
Yeah, I've done it for I after a discussion I emailed some like paper sort of preprints and sort of discussed that. I did that couple times last week, just for people who are poster presenters, or actually there was one and we were both just looking at the same poster, and then he came over to me afterwards and was like, oh, let's keep talking about this. And so that does happen, and I think that only happens if you attend these poster sessions and get talking. That's why the presenters are there, and that's why you should be there, is to talk.
Okay. So I'll summarize your answers as be open and talk to people. Yeah.
People do generally want to talk about their work, right? People are researching things that they're interested in. They're happy to explain what they've done on their poster. And as I think is evident, as a PhD student, you might be going along and sort of thinking, well, everyone else already understands everything that these people are talking about, all of this terminology and these things. And it's been hundreds of years since science was narrow enough that anyone actually could have even an overview of all of a field, right? Everyone is going to conferences and meeting people who are working on a thing that they don't know anything about, because you just can't possibly know. However long you've been in academia, you can't possibly know everything. So people will happily explain, the network theory algorithm that they've used and then applied to linguistics.
So the point cloud analysis, I thought. I have no idea what point cloud analysis is. I'm sure if I had bothered to ask somebody, they might have been able to explain it.
Is it an engineering thing?
Cool. So don't be afraid of asking silly questions, I think.
Yeah.
Just ask. Okay. The next one is how to promote yourself at a conference.
So I have 3 answers for this. So I have include your name and contact details in the last slide of your presentation if you're doing presentations, or as like QR codes, or just make sure that they know who you are, sort of at the beginning, obviously, when you introduce yourself, but also at the end when, you know, when they've been wowed by your presentation and then, I want to, you know more about this person's work, then you give them that information. And my other one was wear your ID badge. There was a guy I met last week in ICASP who presented a poster for 2 hours, and then he only realized at the end he wasn't wearing his badge. So nobody knew who he was. And he wasn't first author on the poster. So like, yeah. And then I'm sort of a recent convert to LinkedIn. I didn't used to be a fan, but I always have tried to, whenever I talk to someone and I get their name, search for them on that and add them, because, you know, if nothing else, it's just like a contact book. So you can, they remember you and you remember them if you do that. So.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Yeah. What about you, Mary? Do you also use LinkedIn?
I try to use LinkedIn. I think it's a good idea. I definitely think, like, if you're doing a poster or presentation, it's good to include your contact details. If you've talked to people, adding them on LinkedIn, like George said, is a good way to actually remember them. Or like in future, if you think of them, then you can at least go back and see who they are.
Yeah. I saw some people, they put a LinkedIn as a QR code on their posters. I think that's maybe a good way to quickly let people know that's you. Yeah.
Yeah. Make it easy for people to sort of get you recorded in their contacts, however that is, whether it's following you on whatever social media.
Yeah, what I have set up is I have a QR code which links to my like web university webpage, which has all my social links, and it sort of has a CV and like list of publications and stuff. So that's like instantly there. So
especially if you're a bit later on in the PhD program and you're thinking about networking for the purposes of what you want to do after, whether that's in academia or industry. A tip I picked up last year from attending LREC with Harish Tayamadabushi, who some of you might remember was a postdoc here, is now a professor in Bath, was a lecturer, one thing he would do was anytime we were chatting to somebody at a poster and he was interested in their work or just thought they presented it well, he'd invite them to give a guest talk to the group here, to the NLP group or whatever. And if you invite everyone you think might be good, and then half of them reply, and then you can try and schedule it. I mean, it gives you a further opportunity for them to promote themselves, for them to talk more about their work, because, as I said, everyone likes doing that, really. And also you can do some more effective kind of networking and idea sharing there. And he was applying that regardless of who they were. It wasn't just people who were sort of already famous, because honestly they're the people who are less likely to say yes, but somebody who was early career, people who'd done something interesting that was relevant. He was making those connections that way, and that's something I will take away next time. Academic.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You're not only promoting yourself, but also give people or create chances for others to promote themselves. That's a very good tip. I've noticed our time is flying, so I'm only going to ask the final one question. Okay, so we still have a few talks going on in the rest of our conference. Is there anything that you look forward to at the conference?
I'm looking forward to presenting my because I quite like. I elected to do a oral presentation rather than a poster because I like doing that a bit more. So I think that's fun. I'm not sure how many people here today are in the area that I'm in, but it's always, I think it's fun to give presentations. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to our presentation, but I'm mainly looking forward to it because I am nervous about the presentation.
So you're looking forward to having finished it?
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to other people's talks. I haven't looked, there's none specifically, but it's just nice watching everyone talk about their research and stuff.
Yes.
There's 2 or 3 other people's posters, especially Edinburgh students who I obviously haven't previously met, that are very relevant and interesting to things that I'm working on this idiomatic language, that I'm really looking forward to having those conversations with them properly during the poster session.
I am actually really looking forward to the poster session later. Like George said, I think it's a good time to talk to people and see what people are working on, at more of a glance overview.
Plus there's Prosecco, I think, right? So they can lubricate the networking. The advantage of doing it at the end of the day.
Oh.
So
Yeah, nice. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and thoughts with me, and that's much appreciated. I hope you all have enjoyed the conference and continue your enjoyment in the rest of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Speech Pitch by Iska Sak.